the police station, building committee and the recreation committee were to work hand in hand in presenting a proposal to your board, the CPC, to secure hopefully funds up to $900,000. And as Mary just mentioned, the recreation committee voted $600,000 last night. The $900,000 I'll get into in a second to show you where that comes from. But the bottom of the page is really important because it's the recreation committee's charge to develop a recreation complex, the King property, within the town hall master plan. So within those parameters is for these guys to come through and to direct how this is developed. And they're supposed to do that with input from all the different youth groups around the community, including the former playground committee, so that they can hear feedback from all different parties and then come back with what they recommend is the right solution for not only a playground, but also to improve the King area property with the baseball and the softball fields and the soccer fields, and also the traffic circulation that's there. So that's the charge that they were given and that they accepted from the recreation committee. So it's really their job to develop the final plan. And they're requesting the funding, which we can get into in a second as to what that is, to allow them to go forward and develop with a not to exceed number of $600,000. Now what you have in this document is a copy of the conceptual master plan that was put together by the police station building committee. This by no means is the final layout, nor intended to be the final layout of how the recreation committee redesigns the recreation area. It was just a thought at 3 weeks ago, or 4 weeks ago, as to how it could be laid out. But it's really up to the recreation committee to figure out how they massage, if you will, and put together a proper design for this area. And hopefully by now everyone's had an opportunity to walk back there. And when you do see that, you'll notice that it's the last recreation area in the town that does not have any significant investment, and it's showing its age. Even though there's been a lot of volunteer work trying to do that over the years, and they put their blood, sweat, and tears into it, it still just needs a huge facelift.
Our recreation area actually would be, even to scale, more like out here. This is only showing the 2 baseball fields and the front softball field. There's another softball field out behind that. And we are looking into how much of the treed area belongs to the town, so that we could perhaps, if given the money, to expand it a little bit, or perhaps change the orientation of one of the fields. We have light poles out there. One of the things we've been asked by one of the fall leagues is, could we actually put lights on those poles? They were installed a number of years ago. They were donated by Super Sports, I think. Am I right, Adam?
Correct.
And they were installed and no one ever did anything. So we would be looking into that as part of the complex. I think I had shared with all of you that we returned money from the Forest Street project, and remember I asked what the process was to ask for it back. Well, now I'm asking for it back, and with a little bonus thrown in. This, our plan, Recreation's plan, was to request money, seriously, not to make light of it, to redo the infields and to help with some of the more dangerous areas. There's overgrown, not just that you can cut back plants, there's poison ivy that's run rampant out there, things that are not safe for the kids who are out there or the adults that are out there. So we already had that in our mind when we were asked by the selectmen after their vote and the police building committee to oversee this whole project with them.
And I think go back to the spring, we had mentioned after last town meeting is that even before this whole thing was coming up is that this whole King Street area, the Little League fields needed to have some upgrade anyway. And it just has evolved into this project. think what's important to, and Mary and the committee emphasized this time and time again last night, no final decisions have been made, no final layout has been done. I think we have some existing infrastructure that needs to be worked with, because we can't pick up the ball fields and relocate them, because that's just cost prohibitive to do that, so it's really upgrading that configuration and adding to it, whatever's decided. What you're also gonna see in the plan is that, from a circulation standpoint, that the police station building committee looked at, as well as talking with EMS, is that how the parking is between the fields right now is relatively a dangerous situation when you have little kids and cars moving around. So the intent with the campus, and I'm gonna stay off the recreation piece, with the campus, is to create some additional parking that doesn't exist right now. Where the police station is, and also over towards, where you have the small restaurant and the funeral home, going back there and trying to fix that area up. Not necessarily as impervious area with asphalt, but to regrade and put in some drainage for that, but keep it as a more impervious area, but allowing for parking to occur without going into the back area, and trying to figure out how that would circulation would work with the ambulances coming in. So these are all the things that need to be incorporated into the recreation piece. But my point that I want to emphasize is that no decision has been made by anybody as to how the configuration is going to be or what it's going to be. And so from there, if you want, I can get into talking about the CPA funding, or do you want anything else to add to that, Mary?
No, I've gone over it so many times in my head, I'm sure I've left out lots of stuff.
So if you flip the page to this sheet, you've seen this before. We used a similar type of layout when we did the middle high school field. And one more to go. Yep, there you go. Okay, so, as the chairman was mentioning, since the CPA started up in 2008, you have secured a significant amount of funding, and I think, put a lot into the different projects. Sorry, thank you. What I'm showing here is when the distribution comes in, and let's look at 2019, the first line here in yellow, is that the tax surcharge plus the 2.5% that's projected is $474,000. On top of that, the state disbursement should be about $94,000, and this was prepared by our finance director with the information she had back on 11/21. With that, it shows that the annual funds for 2019 is $569,000, that this committee is charged with proposing how that gets allocated to town meeting. Now, with that, you have certain requirements. Those requirements are you have to have 10% go into each one of the buckets, so to speak. And that's 10% in the housing, historic, and open space. But the $63,000 you see there for open space, that's actually the first payment on the bond for the sports complex. That's why that's somewhat of an odd number. And then just before that, you see that you have 5% set aside for the admin budget, which then leaves at the very right $363,000 that's technically undesignated. So you meet your obligation with the 10%, and then whatever after that, this committee has the choice of determining what and where to do it where to assign that within those three categories. So now I'm going to go up to the box on the top right, the blue box, and this is where projects, undesignated funds are in each one of these categories. So in the open space category, there's $80,061. In community housing, that can only be used for community housing, really it's affordable housing, is $419,000. That can't be used for anything but for housing. The next category is historic. $227,000 exists in that category as of 10/31. Again, can only be used for historic. leaving an undesignated, funds that have yet to be assigned of $664,000. So that is what is available as of 10/31/18. From there, going down into the gray box below that, here's where we have existing projects that are ongoing. So the elementary school project, again, that's down to about $20,000 now, but that's what it was. Mary Ross had mentioned the forestry project. You currently have $93,000 that's available in the forestry project that would be proposed to be reassigned. And then we have a couple other smaller projects that are there, the master plan, records preservation, Crystal Lake, Lake and Green, and CPC administration, for you guys to determine what to do with those. And this gets me down to the bottom box, the green one on the bottom, and it's where we, in essence, added up these four categories that are in green. The $80,000 is what's existing in the open space account today. The $364 is what's available in the undesignated fund today. The $93 is what could be reallocated to the forestry project, because that was an open space project going to an open space project. You have the discretion to do that. And then finally, for 2019, you'll have $363,000. So technically, today, with the voted town meeting, you would have the ability of assigning $901,000 to any open space project you wanted, or, to some other portion of a project. So that kind of ties back into the selectmen's vote, that although there's $900,000 available, what the Recreation Committee has requested is $600,000. Are there any questions on that before we go into the proposed budget? Again, not all this has to be done, this is just what's available, so it's showing you what your pots of money are that you're responsible for.
I'm not sure the master plan is 17,006, as far as I know, that's already been spent.
Okay. I'll double check that.
And the funds from forestry were allocated back into the undesignated.
Some were, but so,
The 93,000, last meeting was voted to be put back into the undesignated. So it's
but that
no
has to go
longer-
to town meeting to actually.
No.
So the 93 was voted by this committee last meeting?
Yes,
Okay, so that's in the undesignated right now, okay, so where I have it forestry, it should really be undesignated, but it's still the same 93,000.
Right, it's still, basically, when projects get closed out, the money goes into the undesignated.
Undesignated, right, okay. I didn't realize you closed that out last week.
I also think that we closed out Crystal Lake and Lincoln and Green as well,
yeah, we did.
some time ago.
Yep,
Okay. I
and
don't-
that also went back into undesignated.
Okay. So what that means is the undesignated would actually be a larger number than the 901. And I just, and I gotta make sure that the finance director has all that information to make those changes. And
Well,
that-
if these numbers are as of October 31st, that all happened since then, so that would make
Well,
more
the
sense.
901 is really a compilation of everything.
Correct.
It's not on top of the 901, it's just how that 901 is split up.
Correct. Yep, those are the four categories that make the 901.
Right.
And in essence, really what the big change would be is the funds from the forestry really goes back into the old undesignated. So that
Yep.
364 plus the 93 is really the new number for old designated, so now you have three categories versus
Right.
four.
Yep. And then, just let me ask here, on these numbers going forward. So the tax surcharge for 474, that's projected, it's not in the bank.
So, actually, it is relatively in the bank and everything, well, it's actually probably gonna be slightly higher than that. Because what happens is you take the tax surcharge that's there from a baseline.
Yep.
Then we have Prop 2.5, so everybody's values goes up
So
2.5%.
you kinda know where it's gonna head.
It really goes up 2.8 or 2.9%, but we only calculated 2.5,
Okay,
because there's new growth tied into that as well.
so when you go to the 10% open space, satisfied by track and field debt. For 2019, that number is 64,000, let's round it up, 64,000, and then it goes up to 329,000. So I'm looking, so that is because we're just starting to refund that project, or?
So those numbers that in there, all those $300,000 numbers, that's your actual bond payment per year, down to the penny. So those numbers are hard numbers.
That
the
have to
bonds
be taken out.
Have to be taken out, yeah, those are, you can put those in red. Those are
Yep.
already spent, the town has to pay them. Whether the CPC exists or doesn't, the town has to pay that amount of money.
And why is it only 63 for 2019?
So when you go out to bonding and you put it in there, is that when you borrow the money, your payments don't happen the next day, they get put into the next cycle. So there's always a delay by half a year and sometimes 3/4 of a year, so
Okay.
then this whole thing happens.
So it's a partial payment?
It's a partial payment, yes.
Through mid-year.
Okay.
Right, and then when you get to, which I didn't show here, in 2029, I believe that payment, 3, 4, 6, 8, that payment would be below 328. It probably.
So there actually is another payment on here for the track and field?
Correct, we just went out that number of years, I think that would probably be around 250, would be my guess.
And then after that, so 2029, the track and field is paid?
Correct.
And done?
Yep. And again, if you recall, we eliminated the bond for the elementary school because you had enough money in your undesignated funds to pay that in cash, and we said, why would we borrow money if we don't need to borrow money, so we paid in cash.
Other questions?
So, well, I do, I have another question.
Go ahead.
2019, the undesignated is 364.
Yes.
That is not including, no, that is, never mind, they answered the question.
Yep.
So that is undesignated projected based upon the fact that we know we're gonna get 475 with the 3% surcharge.
Mhm.
And then we're projecting that we're gonna get 95 on a state match.
I believe we've already gotten that. Oh, we've gotten
So
designated.
that's done.
Yeah.
Okay,
That 363 is a hard number.
thank you.
And every number after that from 2020 on is probably slightly conservative,
Okay.
slightly.
Yeah, I think the 95 would have come in the November 15th payment.
And that 95 is based on a 36% match? And that number fluctuates based upon what?
So what happened is that when Carver started the CPC, and Bob can say this a lot more eloquently than I can, there were fewer communities in the program, and we were a 3%er. So we were doubling our money, more than that. But then recently, we've had the city of Boston, the city of Springfield, Worcester, and I'm probably missing a few other large cities.
Somerville and Brockton.
Yeah, so basically, all of the big cities now jumped on board.
Are in there.
So now, I can't tell the exact number, Bob, you may be able to do it, there's 365 communities in the state. Pretty much all of them are in here now. So there's no big pieces that'll come out, so whatever the annual piece is, we're probably at a level number, more or less.
But the matches fluctuated from what, as low as, on a 3%, wasn't it as low as 17?
No, we never had a 17, I think we had it as low as a 25% one year.
25, okay.
We've been as high as 100% for a number of the initial years, it was up at 100%. I don't believe we'll ever get back to 100%, but the good news is that the legislature has seen just how much good is being done out of the community preservation funds, and are trying to figure out another way to garner additional funds.
Okay.
And
So you think 25 is a realistic number?
I think 25 is it's a very good base.
And what are these numbers based on?
These numbers are based upon the 94,000, which is a real number for this year, going up 2.5%.
So that's 36, going up 2.5?
the 94 goes up 2.5, so if you look, it's the same
Yeah, but the
proportion.
94 was based on 36, right?
No, it's
Did
on
we get
20.
it? What was the 94 based on?
20% of the 474.
How much?
It's 20% of the 474.
So it's very conservative.
I just did the quick calculation.
Okay.
The 94,962 is roughly 20% of the 474,810.
Okay.
Fran, the last thing I need is after 2 projects are successful, you come back and you say I was too liberal in this, so that's why we're nice and conservative, so we'll stay with the budget.
Okay, just wanna know where the numbers came from.
Yep. Other questions?
I'm good. Yep, thank you. Next.
Next page, which Mary started to talk about, when she mentioned the $600,000, and that's been broken down into the 4 categories. I wanna jump to the asterisk at the bottom of the page, because all of these items, but for the playground, really anticipate on having volunteer labor done, having the DPW assist. I know the Little League and the soccer complex and softball all have electricians, plumbers, parents that would like to volunteer and help out on this, and I'll get into that in a little bit more detail. You know, clearly when we put a new well in, we're gonna have a well driller come in. When we put up some fence, we may have a fence guy come in, but a lot of this stuff is really done, with volunteer and or town labor. So, that's my disclaimer. Let's start at the top with the playgrounds. So the playgrounds, what we're proposing here is that we had one of the consultants that built the existing playground next to the library, which you have a document later on here when they did an analysis of it, Mary White, I think it was. They came back and to replace that existing playground with new equipment like it is right now, and it purely contracted out, no one helping out on it, is $265,000. So that's a number we got from them as an order of magnitude budget for that playground to replace it just like it is. Same number of pieces of equipment, same everything. That's what it would cost to do that. So with that, we've also added in some surface material for the $35,000. And the budget that we're proposing here would be $300,000 to do the playground. Now, again, I wanna emphasize that that's assuming everything is contracted out. We will probably have DPW and other volunteers help level the site, prep the site, prepare the site, which will reduce down costs when we end up hiring somebody to come in to do a playground or playgrounds. So, you know, we're comfortable with that number is a number that's gonna satisfy the requirement to build at least one playground the same size and with the same features as currently exist right now. Now, whether or not the recreation committee chooses to build 2, or 1.5, or whatever it is, that's really for them to work through that process, hearing the public input and working with a designer to come up with a solution that's gonna satisfy the need in the community. And, you know, I think, you know, if we just take a little history rerun, you know, about, I think it was 3 years ago, is when we first started putting money into recreation, and we had the first $15,000. That was the first funds that ever came out of town meeting to actually fund recreation, to programs. And the goal with that was, we were just, you know, still dealing with an opioid issue, we wanna get kids busy, we want kids to have activities, we wanted to build things. And so with your support for this committee, we've had some great success in building a whole bunch of things. But that was the seed money for the recreation committee, and I think last year we moved that up to $20,000, and this year we have another $20,000 going in there so they can hire staff to do programs. It's great to build an asset, but you also have to have the program to use it too, so we're trying to hit it from 2 different directions. So we use an operational money for that. So, again, long story short, staying with the town's overall philosophy to provide more recreation activities, that's the $300,000. From there, we have this broken down into 3 different categories. And the first is with the existing ball fields and softball fields that are there. And assuming everyone's had a chance to take a ride and walk around there, you'll see that the infield is several inches higher than, the diamond is several inches higher than the infield, which creates lips, which creates bounced balls, which creates broken noses, which creates all kinds of stuff. It's just tough to maintain until you actually go through and rip that out. So, 2 years ago, no, last year, I think with the DPW, we went down to the middle high school, baseball field, and we ripped out the entire diamond in the beginning of the spring because it was planted the year before and it didn't seed. So the kids weren't gonna be able to play high school baseball or JV baseball. So with that, we went out and bought sod, had the sod laid down, had a contractor come in and level the whole site at no cost to us. We had AD Makepeace through their Reed Specialty Soils donate all the infield material. We had our DPW guys down there with some other folks in laying the sod out and cutting it and then rolling it. And we had a new infield that's great before it's down there, if everybody's seen it. It came out really well. That's probably the same process we would do with these fields as well, is that we've already had a conversation to talk to some people about donations. I know Adam's talked to some other folks, and I know there's a lot of people that are willing to help donate to make these things happen. So that's why, again, I have my disclaimer in the beginning. So as we look at the fields, we've got, purchase sod, lay the sod down. The infield mix, do the grading. We've got baseball mounds, new bases, equipment that needs to be put in there. Putting in some batting cages. We put new batting cages down the middle high school field. The dugouts need to be rebuilt and put a new roof on those. We've got to do some fence upgrades and some backstop upgrades. And a lot of this is just budget categories right now. And, it may end up being that the recreation committee ends up moving, say, the $15,000 from the fence, or actually, let me rephrase that. They take the $10,000 out of the batting cage and put it into the fence because they realize they need more fence. So they would have to work within that $100,000 budget to accomplish as much as they can. By no means are we proposing that this is gonna be like the middle high school sports complex you just built with the turf. We don't have that amount of money to do it, so we have to phase this project in, and this is the best way we think we can put that together, is to do it in phases with a lot of volunteer support and tackle as much as we can based upon the priorities that the recreation committee sets up from the input they have from the other youth groups. Moving forward to the parking and circulation, I briefly mentioned that we need to do some additional clearing and open up some of the additional parking that's in there. Clearly I think we want to keep the parking out from within the middle of the fields. So that's gonna require a new gate and a new entrance area so that you wouldn't be able to drive cars in between the fields in a pinch point, which is dangerous. The master plan calls for a walking path from the library directly to the playground area, which you can see on the plan that there's basically a sidewalk right through the entire complex. So we would create this into, again, a little mini master plan, a whole complex with everything tied together. In addition to that, looking at regrading the parking lot, again, most of this would be impervious except for the main driveway component. We wanna have this additional parking be on impervious areas, and then putting in.
Impervious or impervious?
Impervious. The driveway to get from like EMS out to the main road, that would be impervious. The parking lot would be pervious outside of that. And then additional siding and curbing, to have pervious parking, you've probably seen where people would take a granite curb and they bury that in there and they let it stick up 1 or 2 inches to kind of delineate where parking spots are. That's kind of one of the concepts that could be used in there. And again, that's a lower cost alternative for a parking lot that doesn't need to be impervious, because it does get used, but it's not used 7 days a week, all year long with heavy equipment. It's there for recreation purposes, and that's a suitable location for that.
Would that be that
Yep.
parking area?
Exactly, that and to the right of where you just pointed.
Yep.
And then finally, the last category really falls under, if you will, the equipment area, is that the facility at one point had 2 wells. As I understand it, one of the wells died,
Struck by lightning.
struck by lightning and is no longer functional, so they have one pump connected to the entire irrigation, which then means that pump is pushing out more pressure than it does and it burns out. So we need to put another well in there and then put two pumps back in there to make that happen. Plus, there's some irrigation upgrades that need to be done back to the softball fields. I'm told that the baseball fields, the irrigation for those is in good condition for the existing distribution, particularly the outfield, that it allows for, and those outfields are good from an irrigation standpoint for what I'm told. So it's really the infields that have to be done in the two baseball pieces. From there, as Mary mentioned, there were some old lights that were donated years ago that were never fully connected on one of the fields. What this is certainly not to do a lighting design like we did down at the sports complex. It's really to go out and buy equipment, go out and buy flood LED lights that can be, associated on a timer with low energy uses, do any electrical upgrades that need to be done, but have that done by volunteers. And, whoever we have that's a master electrician that's gonna, be willing to oversee that, we would have them, actually string it with their helpers. But the intent here, again, to save money, is that we buy the equipment and we have others install it. And I do have a carve out in here of other equipment not specified for $10,000. It's kind of a little contingency built into the equipment because we really haven't got into looking at the bathroom and the plumbing upgrades and or the electrical upgrades that need to be done. So there's some desire to upgrade the bathrooms out there and have that functioning better than it does right now. So, again, this is a lot of sweat equity built into these numbers, although it is a large number of $600,000. Half of it would go to the playground, and the other half would go to completing and upgrading the site with a lot of support from DPW and the different leagues. Again, these are our estimates right now to get started. I fully anticipate once the Recreation Committee prioritizes things, some of these numbers may adjust, and we may move things from category to category, but this would give them a budget not to exceed, that they would have to be able to get as much done as they can. Now, with that whole thing, it doesn't mean that this is gonna be the end of this project. It could be that there's a second phase that happens in 2 or 3 years from now. But, right now, this is where there's a big need to do a lot of work. I
There's
guess,
a lot of public input. Our committee feels very strongly about that.
I got a question, where the newer basketball is behind the police station now, it looks like it's been eliminated from the plan, or are the basketball courts behind that one, the
Yeah, they
old
are.
ones, are those
It's
gonna?
behind there. That's what I was saying. We actually have the property that goes off this page.
So the basketball court, the newer one's gonna still be there?
I think so.
Cause it says it says where that basketball court is, it says that that's the relocated, playground and fitness equipment.
That's the architect's thought. That's not anything decided.
Cause the 2 basketball courts, the older ones behind it, they're basically unusable, so if you wanted to eliminate the basketball court, get rid of those ones. Cause the only one that's, worth using, or that's, capable of being used is the new one, where it shows it's been eliminated.
so just on that, certainly if there's something there that's usable, I think the intent is to reuse it. But as Mary was saying, this configuration back here, but for where the 3 fields are, has a lot of room to be massaged and to be adjusted by the Recreation Committee. And I don't think if there's something usable there, just from a cost standpoint, we wanna try to repurpose it rather than tear it down. So, nothing's been decided from what's there today to this. This is just to kinda get the juices flowing for everybody to think about.
But if you did leave the basketball court there, where would it be the new relocation spot for the playground? Because it's shown where the playground would be located is exactly where the basketball court is now, so. If you were decided to keep it, then you'd have to find a new place to relocate.
There's a lot of thoughts on that the committee needs to go through. One thought that the police station building committee had is after this first was done, is you actually flip-flop the picnic area to where it is where it shows where the playground would be. And a lot of that came after input from the Little League group, is that in between the fields would be a better location for a playground. Now, having said that, that's one input. The recreation committee still needs to evaluate all those, but it could easily go there, or it could go someplace else on the complex. I think what's also been mentioned before is that one of the concerns that came out in some of the meetings is that where it's shown on the plan right now is a little bit hidden, and that it should be brought forward. And that forward could either be in between the fields, or it could be someplace else, but having the playground kind of hidden back there isn't what public comment was talking about, is bringing it forward. But I guess that's up to the recreation committee to figure out where forward it goes.
Mhm.
But I
And
would
that's
not.
why we were asking about, you know, a lot of this area out here is also treed, and how
Yes,
much
yes.
area do we own, can we knock down trees, that kind of thing. I'm
With the-
really not skilled at reading maps, I will be perfectly honest, I need a GPS to find my way home. But, there are people on the committee who are much better at it, so we intend to meet and go out and really look at,
Yeah,
you know, with
I
numbers.
spend, I spent quite a bit of time back there, and, like I said, the basketball court's way in the back, they're basically not functional, nobody uses them at all. So the one in front of it, that's the newer one, I think there was, did fundraisers or whatever for to have it, built. That's the only one worth using, so if you did have to get rid of it, I guess it would be a good idea to upgrade those other basketball courts behind it, so they're at least usable.
Mhm. Thank you.
I think what you're gonna see too is that one of the other comments that came out too, regarding the playground where it's shown way back there, was that parents with young kids didn't wanna have to walk a long distance. So when you're able to park, where we're showing these parking, if the playground was pulled forward, then you're in closer proximity, for the little kids as well.
So when you talk about the budget for replacing the playground, that's basically recreating, and I know we may not, but recreating what we have currently at the library. If trees needed to come down, that's not part of the budget, correct?
Well, no, we do have some tree line in here, I think there's $15,000 for clearing and stumping. In the middle category, now it does say upgrade parking and circulation in that area. But once we have a tree crew out there with a crane, we would take down whatever we needed. Plus, we have the DPW that can take down anything that's not over 50 feet.
Yeah, but that would be,
More than the three,
that would be
you're right.
more than the 300. Because that's in a different pot of money.
That's in a different pot of money, yes. If there had to be some site clearing that we weren't able to do internally, then one pot would have to pay for the other pot.
Mhm.
Well, I bring that up because when we talked about the police building, that was a concern for moving the police building, was taking down the trees, and the cost of taking down the trees. So I just wanna make sure if we move forward with this, there's gonna be enough money.
Just speaking on trees, one of the things that our planning director is working on, with some developers that are building new projects in town, is setting up a tree fund. So as they tear down parts of forest for their project, they would actually be contributing money, and one's already agreed to do this on record with the permit, to assist us in this whole downtown, this whole town hall complex. So we'll be able to buy new trees and come in and do some of this stuff.
I'm a bit concerned that what we've got in front of us is particularly given what Mary said at our last meeting, was that, the rec committee was looking for renovation of all 4 fields. We're not showing all 4 fields here. We're not showing, apparently, the rest of the rec property here. And so I'm concerned that what we have is, at best, a partial plan.
So what you have here is I have a different plan that goes back a little bit further. You can see the back softball field, see the ring right there? It's in here.
I see the ring that shows here, yeah.
Yeah, so that's where the other one is back here. This color version was just done to kind of emphasize the town hall complex. It wasn't really focused on the recreation complex, which would be a whole set of different plans that'll be done. But to answer your question, the intent is to upgrade all of those fields. And what's also good is that for the two Little League fields, the infield mix that will be taken out of there, is that can be reprocessed for softball fields. So that, because the softball doesn't have grass in the diamond, then it allows us to repurpose that for both of those areas, plus bring in additional material into those areas. And where it has the irrigation, we did have a number in here for irrigation, upgrades of about $10,000. That's, the irrigation upgrades are more needed in the softball fields on the back, and then the two Little League fields on the right. Is that right, Adam?
That's correct.
But I'm hearing a high degree of uncertainty in terms of what actually is gonna be planned. That, you know, I'm not hearing any certainty from Mary about what the real end product is gonna be. And given the fact that it's December 18th, as a community preservation committee, we are under some severe time constraints.
Yep.
And this is, if what I'm hearing from Mary is that there's gonna be multiple meetings, you know, we're not, I'm sure we're not gonna have meetings next week, or probably the week after. So how quickly is this gonna all come to fruition?
Well, I think that's why, by starting with the budget, this is the not to exceed number that they would be requesting along with the police station building committee. And now it's to get the landscape architects and the playground designers and everybody to come in and actually start to put pen to paper and put together a plan as to how that's all gonna be done. And, these are the uses that are being proposed for the area to upgrade this whole recreation complex. And, to some of this, we would hope to have some of this actually bid out, particularly the playground, if we could by town meeting. I don't know if we're gonna get that close, but that's a goal. As the committee continues to refine its work, it'll come out with its final plans. But rest assured that those numbers will not exceed what's being asked here. And it'll be up to the recreation committee and the volunteers of the different youth groups and our operation and maintenance department, the DPW, to provide additional assistance to make sure we keep all of those elements within budget.
The uncertainty, Bob, comes from, the vote by the selectmen just being, I think, 2 weeks ago. And, we had one meeting and then met again last night, but last night was only to revote the request for funds. So, as a committee, we haven't gone out and hashed out the layouts of things, or looked into what would it look like if it was, say, in the light green area behind the EMS? What are the pros or cons of that area? What is the square footage of all these? It would be my intention, that after the first of the year, that I would meet with, Michael and with the experts, as they are called, so that we would have accurate numbers of space. We know the amount of square footage that is necessary to replace the playground is there. Whether we use the same equipment in that space or in that space, but we certainly don't want to make, something less than what we have. We are committed to that.
But the committee's normal process has been to actually have plans as well as monetary costs in front of us. And what I'm not hearing is that we're being looked on to say, 600K is good, but based on what?
And I have another question.
The committee actually doesn't usually just work on dollar figures. We work on dollar figures and plans.
So, we've had several discussions bringing us up to this thing over the last few months. But this is the first meeting we've had with actual some numbers. And there's a lot more work that needs to be done over the next 2 months before you have your hearing, before you go to town meeting. There's a lot of work that needs to be done by everybody to bring that up to state. But, it doesn't make any sense for the committee to come out and say, we're thinking that we need $600,000, and you come back and say, no, you can only have $300,000. Well, then, that's a different project that we're talking about. Or you could say, as Mary said, yeah, we'll take more, $900,000. You know, this gives us a number to start to design around, based upon what some of the needs are that are out there, and come back with a plan that hopefully meets your satisfaction. Because at the end of the day, this committee is the only committee that can make a decision on what to send to town meeting as it relates to the CPC funds. So, you know, we're beholden to you, and we have to prove that to you guys over a couple of meetings, you know, as to how we're gonna implement this. And now the work's back on us, is to put that effort together.
But I guess then the real question that I have is what is the timeline? You know, the timeline that we have gets tighter and tighter and tighter.
Absolutely, so we have April the 7th, I think, is town meeting. So from that, you have your hearing before then. You always try to have your vote and your hearing done at least 30 days ahead of time, if I'm not mistaken. So, you know, in essence, you've got to have a hearing completed and take a vote by the end of February. You know, or first week in March, the latest. So, and I know people have vacations and everything, so we gotta block out those dates, and you gotta come back and say, here's our drop dead date, and meet with us every 2 or 3 weeks and bring us up to speed. And at the end of the day, if you haven't met our test by the time we have our hearing, we're not gonna move forward to town meeting. That's okay, but that's our work, the committee's work, the architect's work that they need to do between now and then to get it to the point where you guys are satisfied that you have done your fiduciary responsibility in reviewing the proposal and understanding that a $600,000 budget is adequate.
I have a question. This was approved by the Board of
Board of Selectmen.
Board of Selectmen, okay. But does it have to be approved by the town meeting?
Board of Selectmen has no
What-
say.
Does what have to be approved by town meeting?
This, the new police station,
No.
it's a
Town
done
meeting-
deal?
Town meeting's already approved the police station.
All right, thank you.
Yep, police station, location, already been approved by town meeting, and the selectmen had to finalize the location, which they've done. So the police station is past us, now we're focused on the recreation.
But
Town
to be hon-
meeting didn't approve of where it is.
Town meeting didn't have to. Board of Selectmen did. Town meeting approved the funding to build it.
Okay,
Michael, am I reading this correctly? I mean, basically it says that the playground that's there has to stay until the monies are in place, right?
So what it says here, and the intent with this is that you can't demolish the playground that exists there today until funding is secured.
from one way or the
Now-
other, it's gotta,
Right, so we
Gotta be
knew,
done.
and just to elaborate on that, it was thoroughly discussed at the selectmen's meeting and at the police station building committee, is there may be a period of 75 days plus or minus where there's no playground. And that's part of it, but don't demolish it until you've got funding in place. But once you have funding in place, you can demolish it to move forward with the building of the police station while you're building the playground.
when's the groundbreaking anticipated for the police station?
Well, the groundbreaking technically could not occur until, at the earliest, and I'm not saying this is the date it's gonna be, the earliest it would be is April 8th. Because, and that's assumes town meeting would approve the $600,000. If there's no funding to replace the playground, then we can't have the groundbreaking for the police station until funding has been secured.
So it could potentially delay the start,
It could delay, yes,
and that could affect costs.
everything. But that was what the selectmen put in here, is that they wanted to make sure that there was funding for a playground somehow, and that, you know, the playground wouldn't be destroyed until until funding was secured.
I guess my point is, one way or the other, somehow the money's gonna have to be allocated.
Yeah, or the police station won't go forward, correct.
Or it won't go forward there. It could go forward somewhere else.
There's no support from the chief or others and the police station committee to put it someplace else. That was the ideal location based upon a whole bunch of metrics, as to why they wanted it there.
So if they didn't get the funding to move the new park, then they in a sense be holding themselves up if they decided not to go someplace else.
That's correct. That's correct.
So it wouldn't be
Because
our
what-
fault.
No, it wouldn't be your, no, and I don't want you to think that it's your fault. I mean, because what's happening right now is now that the site's been done, we're gonna be spending several $100,000 on engineering analysis, site borings, going out there and designing it for that specific site with all the engineering plans.
But we
So-
really shouldn't do that until we know that's where it's gonna go.
Well, we do know that that's where it's gonna go, because the selectmen have already determined that's where it's gonna go. And so now the committee gave the go-ahead for the architect and the engineer to do all this site engineering analysis for that site. So that site will be fully designed and then, go out to bid in the spring, so we get contractors to come in and do the work. Of course, in between now and then, is that we have to find a source for funding a new playground. And until that source has been determined to fund a new playground, based upon the selectmen's vote they have today, you can't break ground until that happens.
That's kind of put us in a pretty tough situation.
Well, no, because there's other sources
Well,
for funding.
but it's kind of somewhat obligated towards us that we finance the project in order for something else to go forward, Considering we do spend, most of our money that we do give back to the town, for their money on, recreational projects, a lot of the stuff doesn't get done. We do spend a lot of money on that stuff. Over $4 million for a new track and field and 1.7 at the elementary school, so. We definitely have done our fair share of providing, recreation places for the town, so.
But again, that's what the fund's for. I mean, the
Correct.
fund's for open space, housing, and historic. And, there's money available for historic and housing, that there's no projects that are on your table tonight to talk about. So the only projects that are out there that have any type of momentum or request in front of you is open space recreation, which, again, is what the funds are eligible for.
Right,
And-
would there be an option where you could just piece the parts out, like, instead of it all being a 600,000, have it be 300, 100, 100, 100? So you'd actually, we'd be voting on 4 installments of money instead of
Oh,
all
absolutely.
lumped to some,
Yep.
You could divide it up.
You could divide it up like
To
that.
make sure that, if something goes over budget, you're not gonna take, 50,000 out of upgrading the well to make sure the ball field has dirt. You know what I mean, so.
No, and that's why I was.
They are like completely different projects. I can see how you put the ball fields in the parking lot and the upgraded well all together and stuff, but they are kind of different projects with,
Different
plans and
levels.
stuff. Yeah.
Different levels.
Ideally, Bob, to answer your question,
Okay.
I would say that the recreation committee would have preferred 6 months to do this. To do the legwork that we have to do to present the proper plans. That would have certainly been our preference. That's not what we were given.
What is the town's funding mechanism to the recreation committee to maintain all of this that has been funded going forward?
It's a very good question. And I would add to that all the buildings that we've built as well, which also need to have the same level of maintenance tied into them. So the town has done several things. Now we're talking operational money, so we're outside of CPC, we're outside of capital. Is that it's been made very clear to all boards, committees, school committee, et cetera, and a commitment from all parties, that the town has gone forward and funded all of these new buildings, all of these new fields. And we damn well better make sure we maintain them. So with that, we have done several things. The first is that we have combined our facilities and our DPW town-wide from the school and the town and put them together. Last year, meaning this fiscal year we're in right now, is the town funded an additional facilities manager to manage the new building. So we knew we needed another technician, because it's no longer just maintaining buildings, everything's computerized, we got people trained to run all the HVA systems, so that is happening. In addition to that, in the budget that is gonna be going forward to the town this year, is that we're proposing adding an additional fields specialist that'll work for the operation department, so where we have one now we're adding all these additional fields, we'll have 2. Now, with that, there's some pros and cons. Now we have a turf field that still requires maintenance, but different type of maintenance that can be done when it's raining, versus the fields can only be cut when it's dry. So our intent is that we'll be adding to that staff as well, to have 2 people doing that. And, we were just meeting with the operation maintenance director today, with the finance director, and looking at how we move forward with consolidating some of our fertilizer and our other products to maintain fields. These fields that you have here have been maintained privately, in the past, by the recreation, by the Little League program. And, you know, we're looking to supplement that. And I would say the last thing is that through the capital outlay committee, they have designated a town-wide maintenance fund to help with some of these projects as well. So there is an effort by all parties that if the taxpayers are investing in this infrastructure, we shall maintain it well. There's no longer anything of shobbiness. Prioritization of maintenance is critical. So that's.
So who oversees that budget, the DPW, not the rec committee?
The DPW, through the Operation Maintenance Department, the old new DPW, they have responsibility for all of this.
Including replacing failing fences, you know, that's kind of the stuff I'm asking about, because this committee rebuilt the tennis courts 10 years ago.
Yep.
And I understand that they need to be done again.
Yep.
So over the 10 years, that money was spent,
Mhm.
and now it's for naught, because they weren't
Well,
maintained.
I slightly disagree with you on that, and I'll tell you why, is that over a 10-year period, any type of large facility like that, whether it's the basketball court you heard there, there's gonna be cracking in the pavement. That's gonna have to be patched. We have patched that. That gets patched on a regular basis, and that gets painted on a regular basis, but it's a patch job to make it last a couple more years longer. But, you know, every 8, 10, 12 years, you do have to go back and do a replacement on these, just like when we built the turf field, is the turf field has a design life for 10 years. Now, what is everybody doing about that? You've heard, you know, the issues about fees. Well, particularly, we're really focused on out-of-town fees, that if someone coming from out of town wants to use the field, they're paying a out-of-town rate. Those funds go into a sinking fund, so that in 10 years, the plan would be is that we have money set aside to replace that turf field, because that's such a big project like that. But, you know, going back to the tennis courts, you know, 10 years is not a bad lifespan for those. That's actually, you know, typical. But you have to come back and you have to resurface them, you have to grind them back down, you have to do whatever you have to do, just like your
Do
house.
we have the
with roof.
money in a budget somewhere?
Do we have money in a budget for that? The answer is
Yeah.
no. We don't have that capital money set in an operational budget. Now, that would have to be funded from one of two sources in future years. It would have to come out of the capital budget, which would mean we move equipment around, or it would have to come out of the CPC funds. Those are the two choices for capital projects or recreation activities. But as far as maintaining, we're maintaining it.
Okay.
Adam, you say something?
Yeah, sure. I appreciate it. I'm Adam Holmes, for those that don't know. I'm the president of the youth baseball program here in town. I've been president for 3 years and I've been on the board for the last 5 or so. And I grew up in town, so I played on the field as a young kid. I intend to and plan to work in collaboration with the rec department, as well as soliciting opinions from the other members of my board. The men's and women's softball league, the soccer league, the tackle football league, the flag football league as well. To work collaboratively to try and design a project and develop a plan that services the largest group possible, to the greatest extent possible. My expectation as a baseball president for this particular project and for the request for funding for this project is that the majority and the priority for this particular project is the playground. So if you are so inclined to approve funding for $600,000 for this project, my expectation is that the overwhelming priority for the project would be the playground. Now, as a result of placing the playground somewhere on that property, there may be a domino effect with what the current space is utilized for, whether it's parking or a basketball court or the snack shack or a field or what have you, which I don't anticipate making any major project renovations taking place because it would impact the overall cost of the project and affect the feasibility of doing so. But if there's a playground placed, for instance, in the middle of the two Little League fields, which my own personal opinion is that's a good location for it, then that would drastically impact our current parking area. And we wouldn't have enough parking to service the Little League and the families that are there for Little League on the weekends. So there is a domino effect. It's not a matter of we can just plop a playground somewhere and we don't need to do parking, for instance. There would be an intrinsic effect on the property and on the site that would result as a result of placing a playground there. So my expectation and my understanding is that the priority for the funding would be the playground, but that the overall goal would be to try and make improvements to the property that benefit the youth baseball league, the men's and women's softball league, tackle and flag football, as well as soccer. And to do it all and do it the right way while we can. While we're there, while we have the accessibility and the availability to make these improvements to the property, we'd like to try and do so. Now, with respect to the youth baseball program in town, we're a relatively small organization. We have roughly 200 players that participate in our spring baseball program. And 100% of the upkeep, maintenance, capital improvements, to your question about dilapidated fencing and all that sort of stuff, 100% of that is funded currently by the youth baseball organization. We pay to fix the sprinklers. When the well breaks, we pay to fix the well. When the grass needs to be mowed, we pay to mow the grass. We hire a private company to mow the grass for us. We fertilize the grass ourselves. We do 100% of the maintenance and upkeep on that property ourselves. We simply do not have it in our budget or in our financial capability to make substantial improvements to the infield for those fields. We've tried for years, my predecessors tried, the league itself has tried for years to try and do it and do it to the best of our ability. But we don't have the resources to do that as a parent volunteer organization. So the wish list, if you will, is to make some more substantial improvements to the infield so that it is a better playing surface and a better overall experience for the kids that are participating in the league, and it's safer for everybody that's participating in the league. The only way that I can see us doing that as a youth organization is with your help. There's simply no other funding mechanism to get roughly $20,000 per infield to redo those infields. We're not gonna be able to do it as a youth organization. The only way we can do it is with your help. The recreation budget is $20,000 a year. They don't have the funds to do it. So that's essentially how we ended up where we are today, where we've had the desire for years to make substantial improvements to those infields so that they can be what they should be and something that we can be proud of, but we simply don't have the financial capability to do that as a result of the desire to move the playground there, or at least consider that as a potential site for the playground. I think it makes sense to redo the softball fields, to redo the baseball fields, to look at this as a total master plan project, something that we can then have sort of a cohesive flow, and it looks like it was done with some coherent thought to it, as opposed to a hodgepodge construction over the last 5 decades, which essentially is how it evolved. So that's my plan, my wish, my desire for this overall project. I understand that although there might be roughly $100,000 allocated to the baseball and softball fields, when push comes to shove and the final plan's done, it might be 85, it might be 75. And to the greatest extent possible, that's the most that we could possibly wish for, ask for, and hope for as a baseball organization, understanding that the priority of the project is the playground. So, again, I plan to work very closely with the rec committee, with the community members, the prior playground committee, everybody else involved with the project to come up with a nice, cohesive, comprehensive plan. But the hope is that you'll approve the funding so that we can move forward with the project, so that the police station can move forward with their project, and we can take a step forward towards building a municipal recreational space that the town could be proud of, as opposed to what's currently there. So that's my hope.
As long as it's, if you're allowing public speaking, my name's Cornelius Shea, 148 Plymouth Street, Carver. I don't think anybody here, more than you guys, understands the financial weight and responsibility of your position. And frankly, I have to agree with some of the comments that were made tonight. This is an idea. It's a good idea. The fields do need upkeep. We do need the playground, but this is just an idea. We have a couple months, I think, holding off the vote until something more concrete, something that has some input into it, rather than just saying, here's the money, go ahead and do with it what you will. I think, I don't think that we're quite ready to make this new step.
We're not voting tonight.
Well, no, I'm just saying, cause I saw on the agenda, it looked like a presentation request.
I specifically did not include a vote tonight.
Okay, no, I appreciate that, thank you very much.
So it seems to me like there's a fair amount of work that the rec committee is gonna have to be doing in the next 2 weeks. Because right now, based on what we have, I couldn't vote one way or another based on what we have in front of us. I definitely need to see a lot more detail. And as I said before, I think
Can
we're
I-
pushing the envelope right now.
Can I ask, is it is the process that we would have a public hearing and then CPC would vote before it went to town meeting?
Correct.
And by law, do you have to have a public hearing in January?
No,
Okay.
I have to have we have to hold, it's actually a public meeting, it's not,
Okay.
but it is required by
It's posted
statute.
as a public hearing, just to be safe.
Right. And we hold it, and we don't vote until after the public meeting has taken place, because we wanna get, the whole intent of a public meeting is to get the public's input.
That was, I just wanted to be sure, that's what I had told
That's-
committee, but I
So
wasn't
that's the chance.
exactly sure that was the
Come.
process.
Speak to us if they like it, or if they don't like it. In many cases in the past, we've had public meetings that we've talked to ourselves, so.
Yeah, there's been a lot of those. But you know, on that, Mr. Chairman, I mean, again, we didn't request a vote tonight, nor we offered prayer to give one, because we still have a lot of work to do. But we wanted to share what information we have today, and it's up to the Recreation Committee, with the support of consultants and landscape folks, to see what they can come up with a more detailed plan that's gonna meet the satisfaction of this committee. And if it does, great. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But if the onus is on the Recreation Committee and the consultants to try to put something together and see if they have something that's gonna work with the support of the different youth groups, to come up with hopefully a plan, just like we did with the elementary school, just like we did with the sports complex. I mean, these things take multiple steps. The first time we came to you for $1.9 million for the school, you said no. I think Fran said no. But we did go.
No?
Yeah, you did. You did say that. And then when I came for the standpoint to do the recreation field down at the middle high school, I think somebody said, damn no. But over the multiple meetings, we came back with the supporting documentation. And I think the amount of building that this town has done, we've proven ourselves that we know how to manage projects. We just now need to work on the scope and work on the plans to get to you, so you have a comfort level to move forward with. But at the end of the day, if you don't, that's your choice.
I just have a question, just to learn. So the recreation committee is expected to come to the next meeting or hearing with a plan, like how do they fund that? Because they've been given a lot to do, like who's pays for that?
So that's
You know what I mean?
volunteers.
I'm just curious,
Sure, yeah, no,
because I
no.
feel like we're setting this for people to feel it.
Yeah, no, that, we're, and part of what, you know, I may need to elaborate on is that, you know, we're gonna make sure the funding is available for the project manager, to oversee it, so it's called an owner's project manager.
So it comes out of your
and-
budget?
Yes, it's gonna come out of the town budget.
Okay, that's what I was
And
curious.
then, at the same time, to provide design fees for them to hire an architect, a landscape architect, to look at this. We've already had a local surveyor, volunteer to survey the whole property, which will answer the one question as to how far the property goes back. And we'll compile all this information, and they can have multiple meetings to put that all together, and come back, you know, hopefully for a meeting in January as an update meeting with the committee, and then a hearing or a public meeting, you know, in February, to present the final plan, but at least to be able to come back with an update.
I mean,
Thanks, Jan.
I couldn't agree with Mr. Holmes more, is that this needs to be a master plan, and the town needs to alleviate some of the responsibility, I believe. So I was just curious how you could actually get all that done,
Right.
pay for it before coming before this committee.
And I think your point's well taken, is, you know, as well as Adam and his predecessors have done, trying to maintain that facility with 200 kids and pay for all those repairs, there's not enough money to do it unless you're gonna charge the kids $500. And no parent's gonna pay $500 for the kids to play there, they'll go to an AAU program.
Right.
So the town, you know, and we all talked about this a year ago in the recreation too, is that, you know, this was the next area, the King Street area, that needed to be upgraded. and that was before we even discussed the police station, is that it needed work anyway. And that was kind of, I think, and go back in the minutes, I'm sure it's in there, from a year ago where I brought this up, is that's the next area to do that, is there.
I have a couple of things, but the first one is, now, it's supposed to go with the RFP, all right, if you're gonna put it out to bid for a project manager or something like that, doesn't it have to go out to right, fair practice, purchasing, right?
Bob, we would actually be using our same OPM that we're doing right now. He would be overseeing this project as well.
Well, isn't that not right to other ones that could bid into the process too?
Bob, as I said, this is something that we'd be using our existing OPM to do the work for this.
Okay, I just think
It's allowed within the procurement. It's allowed within the procurement.
I just think it'd be more fair if other people had the opportunity to put a bid in and try to get the lowest bidder for it. That was my first thing. The second thing is I was just at an RDA meeting upstairs and thought the cutoff date, what Mr. Melanowski had said, was December 6th to put in articles for town meeting. So,
It is. But the CPC has a standing article that goes into there, so we've already known that the CPC is required to submit an article every year. It's on the warrant every year, whether or not there's a project or not.
so other people could put articles in.
That's a different question.
Okay. Thank you.
Sir, David Aldridge, 12 Meadow Street. I just have a question, I'm coming in late on this, and I clearly understand this rec part, but when we talk about the high school, because I got a son that plays over there, they don't have bathrooms on the field that we just built. That might be all taken care of, but I don't know this, and I know that there was conversations from the parents that they were talking about putting sprinklers on those fields over there, that there wasn't money in the budget for, and then when they took all the fill, when they built the turf field, they destroyed, I don't even wanna call it a soccer field, but they used to play soccer back there, that was in pretty rough shape, I mean, it had potholes everywhere. Is that something that's competing against this project, or is that already had money delegated to it to restore those back to wherever they should be?
So that, to answer your question, that project is not competing with this project. There still is additional work that needs to be done on that site. There is some additional money that's left over for irrigation that's currently being worked through with the school administration and also with the operation and maintenance department. And I think too, over there's also been some recycling of fields, so there's a new field that was built, and stay off for 2 years to let it grow.
Yeah.
So now that's online.
Yeah.
And then you go through the next cycle of the next field to do that. That's one of the challenges when we have the natural turf fields, is to how do you balance those out for the seeding that's all done.
So I just know with the youth soccer in that school, I mean, Carver's big on soccer, so I know that they take up a lot of fields, that's all, I just.
And then at the elementary school, there's 6 small soccer fields that are built at that, but those won't be available until, actually not even next year, because everything didn't set, so it's gonna be a whole nother growing season before those are available. But the point being is that, talking to the rec committee and other youth groups in town, we recognize what the needs were. And that's why at the elementary school, that's why 6 soccer fields were added to that for the little kids to go through that.
No, that's perfect.
And I think, Mary, you guys are also working with some of the other fields too, the Forestry, what was the other field that you?
We just completed Forest Street, and it's our hope to have flag football there.
Yeah, I know we used that a
expanded
little
the
bit.
area so it is the size of
Last
2.
fall, and then the purchase fields too.
Yep. So there's a little bit of,
So we've had a lot of growing pains.
No, I was just wondering, cause I hear at the games, that's why I asked, cause I just, people were looking at the the nice stone box there, and there was conversations that's down the road, concession and bathroom area, I guess everything's in it underneath, it just needs to be brought up.
Home
Right.
of the future.
Home of the future. And just on that, as there is some constraints with fields, because we're regrowing them now, and just like I said, the elementary's not online, but once we get through another growing season or 2, there should be more, I don't know if I wanna say more than ample, but there's gonna be a lot more space available for people to do it. As it relates to the bathroom facility that's down there, again, a lot of misinformation that was out there, that was never part of the original plan. What we found out, it was $800,000 to do that, and you see how tough this committee is right here. they weren't gonna spend $800,000 for, you know, a bathroom and a snack shack when they didn't have the money available at the time, to put that in there, so, you know, I think one of the things that was discussed was that, the Booster Club would raise, you know, I think it was around $20,000, $15,000 a year, and the building was gonna cost us $800,000, so the numbers just didn't add up to do it when you didn't have the $800,000 that was there. But, having said that, is that, I don't remember the exact number, I wanna say it was like $15,000, is that an underground tight tank was put in there before all the concrete was poured, just in case in 5, 10, 15 years, somebody donates some money and wants to build it, you wouldn't have to rip up everything that was built and all the stone walls and the sidewalks to put in a tight tank, you'd have that there. And there's conduit to run stuff, there's not plumbing or there's not wires running there, but the conduit's there, cause that's short money when you're building that for a future build out, so.
They were talking about both schools possibly taking
Yeah.
on a project, I mean, people are exploring different avenues, I understood that, I just didn't know what competes with what, that's all.
Right, right. And then I think, you know, when you weigh out things, is that if you're looking at the town from these guys' perspectives and also from the administration perspective and the youth groups is, what's more important, fixing the area up behind here, the King Street area, or, you know, a snack shack? You know, and that's where you're gonna get the biggest bang for your buck for the kids, and if the focus is on the kids and give them opportunities and activities to do, then you're gonna put your money there, cause you only have so much money.
Yeah, I, like I said, I just didn't know if it was something that was, like, talked about being allocated last year, and then there would be somebody that would move to have it come in and compete against the funds. I mean, I get priorities, I was just wondering if it was already pre-committed money that had to come out, or was talked about coming out.
I think it's in year 10 of the capital plan.
Cause I know Thanksgiving
Year
morning.
10 always goes to year 11.
I know Thanksgiving morning, people would have paid to have that snack shack for hot chocolate because it was about 10 below. So,
Was that the game that I heard that it was the girls soccer team actually did a pop-up tent and had their own concession stands? They made like 5 or 10 grand.
I don't know how much they paid, but there was a couple of times that they did that.
It was entrepreneurship.
So are there any more questions or comments about the, rec committee proposal? Okay, when would be a good time, when would you be expecting to be able to come back to this committee to present?
Before you answer that question, can I ask this question? And then let's work back from town meeting. What's the latest date your committee's comfortable holding a public hearing? And let's pick that date and then work back from there. Cause quite honestly, every additional week that these guys can get to go through this is gonna only make the plan more solid. So it looks like from what I'm hearing, this is the only project, short of you moving your 10% in each one of the categories of town meeting, that would be on the warrant. So,
Well, we actually have to present another project, and that's the, proposal from the Carver Housing Authority, since the proposal has been brought to us. I would be at least discussing that at the,
at the hearing,
at the hearing.
yeah. Did they withdraw that?
No. Not formally.
Alright, so you would have potentially 2 items at the hearing.
Correct.
And one may be withdrawn before that, but who knows?
When did you say town meeting was?
Town meeting is April 6th, 7th, something like that.
That's
That's a
Saturday and Sunday.
weekend.
Alright, so it's not that.
The 9th,
Maybe the 8th or the 9th.
the 8th is a Monday.
Alright, tell you exactly. I have the 9th,
30th is good.
April 9th,
A Tuesday.
Tuesday, April 9th. So backtracking that. I mean, maybe March 7th for the hearing?
typically do Thursdays, right?
That's the first Thursday in March.
We could do possibly March seventh.
And there's a 2-week block out in February, right?
Yeah, there's a,
But that's, I'm just making sure we don't touch that one.
The only thing is, Bob, if we had the meeting March seventh, when would the vote be taken? Because I'm away in March.
and I'm away in February.
Fran, we can dial you in.
Can I
No
vote?
participation.
I can't vote remotely.
Yes, you can.
Yeah, you can.
As long as there's a quorum.
It's my
Exactly.
vacation.
Vaya pina colada.
I mean, conceivably, we could move it back to the 28th of February, but
Well, I'll show you where I'm not available. Here to here. So, if you have the meeting here, when would you be ready?
if we wanted you there, then we'd have to be scheduling.
Either the week after or the 28th.
It would be the week after, we'd have to do it.
The week after what?
It'd be the 14th.
If we held it on the public hearing on the seventh, then we would probably meet again on the 14th.
Anyone away that time frame?
Of what month?
I'm good.
March.
Okay.
So 7th for the hearing and 14th for the vote?
I'm all right with that if everybody else is.
But when are we getting,
So now to that next question is, Mary, I'm gonna just suggest this, so we maybe you could have 2 meetings before the meeting, but I'm gonna suggest, maybe January 24th or February 7th.
For whom to meet?
To make a presentation, to give them an update. We can give, and I guess, so here's the question, is that there's clearly a lot of work that the Recreation Committee needs to do. And now that we've established March 7th is when we're gonna have the hearing, would you be amenable to having actually a next meeting in the beginning of February, subject to when Bob picks it, to have the presentation and update as to where we are? That'll give us a good month to start to assemble some information and get to you. Because, I mean, clearly the burden is on us to present something to you that you're gonna be comfortable with.
It's a huge burden.
It's a beast of
The last week in February, I'm out, but
Do you work with the playground committee
and the,
on this?
Yeah, they're gonna be
I
part of it.
will.
Okay, cause that's important.
That's part of the,
currently
all the
February's not
groups.
gonna work for me, so we've either gotta do the 24th or the 31st of January.
The 24th of January or the 31st, can we go 31st? Just like Thursdays and
Yeah, every,
I think, you know, assuming we're gonna get all the information that we want,
Well, I mean, I'm just saying, our committee, they work full-time. So I'm saying it to you
Yeah.
that,
and I'm saying
We
that
need as
this
much time as
committee
we
needs
can.
as much time as we can have to review the plans and
True.
and be comfortable with the plans.
I get that.
And to give it to us on the 31st, and then,
And then a week later, we have to vote on it.
no.
No, you're voting a month later.
This is January 31st.
Right.
So January 31st for the next meeting,
Okay,
with the hearing on March 7th.
okay.
And then that also gives an opportunity, if there's a need for a meeting in between the two of
Yep.
those, you have a month to schedule something in.
Right,
if
then
there's a
you
need
could
to.
tell us what else you're looking for.
Right.
Okay.
I think what I've heard is January 31st will be the next meeting of your committee with a presentation from the Recreation Committee as to what their plans are, how they've developed plans. And then from there, we'll discuss next steps, but the intent would be is on March 7th to have the public hearing. And then you would come back on March 14th for a final vote.
And that's assuming that we're gonna get complete plans on the 31st.
That's correct, yeah. That you're gonna get plans and it's, that you're comfortable with. Because you have numbers now, so you wanna have some plans tied to those numbers as to what am I gonna get for the 300 plus the 1 plus the 1 plus the 1.
Everyone comfortable with the dates?
That's good.
Jason?
I'll make it work.
Okay, is there any other business? We've just set the next meeting date, so. Any other business? Eric, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded, all in favor?